All right, welcome everyone to our latest ALTA Insights webinar. I'm Jeremy Yohe, ALTA's Vice President of Communications, and today we've got a great webinar that's going to look into and discuss measuring employee engagement. Employees' attitudes toward an organization can have a real impact on how they approach their jobs, how they treat customers, and employee turnover. Sorry, we got a little feedback there, but hopefully we can get through this. Research also suggests that high levels of employee satisfaction are associated with higher productivity and profitability. So we're going to look at how to measure employee satisfaction at the corporate level and also within departments. We're also then after the presentation, we'll take some time to hear from a couple industry leaders who have used results to improve their operations, company culture, and bottom line. I do hear some feedback, sorry about that. Before starting, I need to touch on a few housekeeping items. Those lines are muted. If you have a question, we'll have time for Q&A at the end. Submit your questions in the chat box. Today's webinar is being recorded. You'll get an email with a link to the recording tomorrow. You can always access all of ALTA's webinar recordings at alta.org/webinars. Again, that's alta.org/webinars. I need to thank Old Republic Title for sponsoring today's webinar. And before introducing today's speakers, we have a short commercial from Old Republic.
What sets us apart from the competition? With a national presence and local offices to support our agents across the country, we have the knowledge, tools, and resources to help promote agency growth and support your business operations. Maintaining a strong financial position is core to Old Republic Title's strategy for success. From our sales team to policy assistance and underwriting, our team has the passion and experience to provide the answers you need. Old Republic Title, where excellence is standard.
All right, thank you, Old Republic. Now let me introduce today's speakers. First, we have David Long. David is Chief Operating Officer for DecisionWise. DecisionWise helps organizations create engaging cultures by measuring and improving employee engagement and turning that feedback into results. Also joining us, we have Shauna Cordello. Sorry, Shauna, butchered that. Shauna is President of Pennsylvania-based White Rose Settlement Services. And we also have Ted Rogers. Ted is President of the Security Title Guarantee Corporation of Baltimore. Both Shauna and Ted are members of ALTA's Our Values Work Group. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to David. And let me make him the presenter. There you go. You should be able to share your screen.
Okay. Not if you can hear me.
We can. You just may want to put your there you go.
Yeah, should be in presentation mode here. Yep. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us today. I appreciate that. As Jeremy mentioned, my name is Dave Long. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for DecisionWise. I've worked in this organization and working with many different organizations over time on employee engagement, employee experience, culture, leadership development, those sorts of things as an organizational development consultant. And I still, even in my leadership role today, still work with organizations individually and leaders individually in analyzing the feedback that they receive from these surveys or from individual assessments that they get in order to help them improve. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that we've pulled out of research and really talk about some of the broader research that has happened around employee engagement to kind of give you an understanding of how how this concept might be important to you in your own organization or your own agency. where how you might be able to use it, how you might be able to put it to work, and how it might be able to improve what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So I'm going to get right into the presentation here. We'll be covering a few things today during this discussion. One thing we want to talk about is sort of the benefits you get from engagement. We'll talk a little bit about the ROI, but also if you're kind of thinking about, is this something that I need to be paying attention to? What are some of the criteria we look for an organization where engagement becomes a little more important? If you are a person working independently and never seeing anybody throughout the day, and you are a switch operator or something like that, is it really important that you're excited about the work that you're doing versus if you're working with customers and things like that? So we'll talk about sort of the conditions that are where engagement of employees becomes a little more critical. We're going to define engagement. We're going to let you know what that is. How does it differ from culture, or this term that's become popularized in the last 5 years, employee experience? We'll talk about some of the things that we've pulled out of our own research that help us understand the level of engagement for individuals and for organizations. And you can think about these things as well as you're thinking about your own level of engagement, how you feel about the work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, and how some of these factors that I'll talk about will impact your own personal engagement. And hopefully it'll make enough kind of a logical sense to you that you could even take some of the keys that I'm going to talk about today and just put them directly to work, even without doing a survey, without measuring the level of engagement. You can think, how can I implement some of these things even just today? We'll talk about as we go into kind of the survey process, what are the sorts of questions we would ask on a survey. We'll talk a little bit about the engagement survey process toward the end as well. And then, as Jeremy mentioned, if there are questions that you have, we'll address some of those at the end as we have time. After I finish speaking, I believe we're going to do a Q&A with Ted and Shauna about their experience in kind of measuring and working through engagement in their organizations, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. Okay, let's get into this. Okay, how critical is engagement to your organization? Now, obviously, we're here with the ALTA as an association. You all have kind of a similar situation that you're looking at in terms of how you operate your agencies or your organizations. But just to kind of give you an idea of where we work with organizations where sometimes, okay, engagement is important here just from a mental health perspective of your employees, but does it really drive performance in the organization? Well, we find that if there are certain conditions that are met, then engagement becomes even more critical to your organization. So here's some of the conditions, and some of them will apply to you, some of them won't. But for example, when you have a high level of client or customer interaction in your business, in your organization, where you have people that are meeting with the people that bring you the money that you need in order to operate as an organization, then it's important that your people are engaged. If they look disinterested or dissatisfied as they're working with clients or customers, those customers are much less likely to come back. It leads to a poor employee experience, leads to a poor customer experience. And so when you have that interaction between employees and customers, then engagement becomes very important to your organization. A high-touch production process, and we look at, at the very basic level, you could look at a manufacturing organization. If machines are doing most of the production in that setting, then engagement is not as critical as if people are very hands-on in the production process. A good example of this is I used to work with an organization that produced artificial heart valves, and there's no machine that can create those. They have to be created by human hands. And so they were very interested in, and it found it very critical that the people in that organization were very engaged, even though they never talked to a customer, even though they weren't involved with innovation, even though there wasn't a ton of collaboration. Engagement was important because they wanted those people to understand how important those artificial heart valves were to the people that were getting them, and they wanted those people to be very engaged in the work that they were doing. So a high-touch production process is definitely one of those things conditions where if you have that, then you'll want engagement in your organization. You might think about what is the cost of losing an employee in your organization. If it's high, if training of a new employee coming in the door is very difficult, if it takes a long time for people to get up to speed, not only that, if you lose some of the contact that you have with some of your customers or clients, all of these things are parts of the cost to employee turnover beyond just the cost of replacement, which may be a more expensive employee coming in through the door. So you might want to think about in your own agency, what is the cost that you endure, all the costs that you endure when somebody leaves the organization. If that cost is high or higher than you're willing to bear, then it would make some sense to invest a little more in employee experience and engagement in your organization. How much do you need innovation in your organization? How much do you need to kind of push the organization forward, improve processes, do some of that proactive work that you often need to do in order to really be successful as an organization? The degree to which you need that innovation would determine how much you need engagement in your organization. And the last thing is, if you're growing quickly, or if you have a lot of, if you just are busy a lot of the time. I know probably last year you all were a lot more busy than you are this year, but when you're in periods of rapid growth, it's not something that you can afford to do to just lose employees. It's hard enough to replace the ones that are losing, but if you're growing and needing to kind of increase the number of staff that you have, then it can be very difficult to be kind of coping with a poor employee experience where people are leaving your organization and also trying to replace and then try to even grow from there. So if you're in a period of rapid growth, it's important to take a moment and kind of pay attention to how your culture is impacting employees. As far as ROI of employee engagement, we've got a few sources here, and this slide deck will be shared with you. A lot of this research has been done by third-party organizations. I know that the Gallup, for example, does a lot of research on the ROI of engagement. I honestly think, having seen this at play in certain organizations that I have worked with, I actually think that some of these numbers are a little bit modest in terms of how engagement can impact, because where I see highly engaged organizations, I see highly functioning organizations. They're growing quickly, 19.2% growth in operating income when compared to other organizations. They tend to grow profits as much as 3 times faster than their competitors, and profits meaning we're bringing in more revenue, but we're also being more efficient with the work that we're doing. Therefore, we're able to churn through the revenue a little quicker. Obviously, employee retention, I asked you to maybe consider what is the cost of losing an employee in your organization. That, when you have highly engaged employees, they're 87% less likely to leave the organization, and therefore you would have 87% less cost in terms of the cost of losing employees in your organization. If you have a disengaged employee, for every $10,000 that you pay them, it can cost you like $3,400 of that from just unproductive time, disengaged time, time where they're just not being productive toward the goals of your organization. And so that can be a big deal. There's an estimate of $350 billion a year in the US economy that is lost to disengaged employees. So there's lots of benefits, financial benefits, but I think that a lot of us can look at employee engagement and a good employee experience. And if you're leaders in the organization, or even if you're just part of the organization, you understand the benefit of having an environment where people can come in and feel like they belong there, but feel like they are engaged in their work and feel excited to be there and happy to be around the people that they're working with every day. So you can kind of, I think there's a feeling that most people don't question the benefits of employee engagement. They may question the financial impact that it might have, but I think that the financial impact speaks for itself as well. All the research tells us that there can be a very good positive impact in your organization by investing in more and better employee experience, and therefore getting the outcome that we're looking for, which is more employee engagement. I've been using these terms already, so I want to define them really quickly so that we have kind of a shared definition for what I'm talking about today. As we, especially as we get into this presentation and I start using these over and over, I want you to know what I mean when I say each of these words. So the first word that I'm going to define today is culture. And the way that we could define culture is a set of values, norms, guiding beliefs, and understandings that are shared by members of an organization and taught to new members as the way to feel, think, and behave. A very basic definition from one of the people that I've learned about culture from that he likes to use is the way we do things around here. And so culture is not just how do we feel as employees, it's everything that we do as an organization. It's the guiding beliefs that lead us to do certain things the way that we do them. So they inform the culture informs our processes. It informs the way we speak to each other. It informs the way we deal with clients. It's just the way we do things around here. And when a new member, a new person comes into your organization and is learning your organization, one of the first things that they start to see, and they may not define it and they may not have something written down for them to, but they start to understand what are the values of this organization? What are the guiding beliefs of this organization? What are the, how do I behave in this organization in order to sort of fit in here? And so it's the way we do things around here. That's the culture. Employee experience then is the sum of perceptions employees have about their interactions with the organization in which they work. Or another way to say that is taking that definition of culture and say employee experience is the impact of the culture on the employees. Or another way to say that would be the impact of the way we do things around here on employees. So employee experience is basically all these things that we have as cultural artifacts and all the things that we do here to get work done has an impact on the employees who work here. And that is what we call the employee experience. Employee experience then is an outcome of culture. Employee engagement is defined as an emotional state where employees feel passionate, energetic, and committed to their work. As a result, they are more likely to invest their best selves into the work that they do. So another way to say this is that employee engagement is the employee's positive emotional response to the employee experience. Or disengagement would be the employee's negative emotional response to the employee experience, and how they act as a result of that is what really matters to you in your own agency or in your own organization. How they act as a result as an engaged employee. Are they bringing new members in, new members of the organization in and making them feel welcome? Are they, as a disengaged employer, are they talking poorly about the leadership or the decisions that are being made in the organization and therefore kind of having a negative drag on morale for everybody else in the organization? So those are the definitions of the things that I'll be talking about today. Another way to say that is engagement is an outcome of employee experience, and employee experience is an outcome of organizational culture. So in order to improve engagement, it will usually require improving the employee experience, which likely means that you need to adjust your organizational culture. So these three things are interconnected pretty highly. And so when we're thinking about improving engagement, we're almost always at the root of it, thinking about how do we improve our culture in order to have a better impact on employees that will lead them to be more engaged. One of the things that you might ask is, what is your organization ready for? The effort to adjust employee experience to improve engagement must start somewhere. So where do you begin? Well, an easy way to begin and to look at this is by looking at a maturity model. There are some organizations where it's a strategic part of what they do to have a great employee experience. Pretty much all the conditions that I talked about up front, they're highly customer facing, they have high touch production process, they have a need for innovation, they're growing quickly. All those things, when that's the case in your organization, it makes more and more sense to say, I want to go all the way with this employee. I need engaged employees in order for us to be successful as an organization. And so they go through these different steps, these different levels of maturity in order to get there. It's very hard for you to step in the first day and say, I'm going to work on engagement. And the way I'm going to work on engagement is to be at the mastery level already. No, there's kind of a series of steps, and one is dependent on the next in order for you to kind of get to that level. Now, most organizations don't feel like they need to get all the way to sort of the mastery level where they're teaching other organizations how to engage their employees. Most of them are trying to kind of get up to the point where they can expand ownership of engagement to the rest of the organization, or at least to the management level. But you begin with this measurement level. So how do organizations solve for engagement? Well, initially, what they'll do is they'll run a survey about employee experience, and they will ask, it'll be a comprehensive survey asking about many different parts of the employee experience that we as an agency or an organization can control. And that's an important part of this. If there are parts of the employee experience that you just can't control, well then, too bad, so sad. That's not something we should be surveying with the organization about. What we would rather do is survey about those things that we have the most control over. So we put together this survey, and then we get the results of the survey, and the results of the survey will tell us, okay, there's some things where we scored pretty well. Gives us a good understanding of what are the strengths of this organization. When we're looking at the employee experience, why do people want to come to work here? It's usually going to be in those areas of strength. And oftentimes organizations score high because people love their teams, or they love their manager, or they love some aspect of the culture. Whatever that aspect is, that's a strength, that's something for you to understand and say, okay, this is part of our value proposition. This is why people like working here. But then there's some other parts of this where we say, this is why people hate working here. Like the flip side of this, and just to be blunt, right, this is why people don't like working here. And so we want to say, look, let's maybe create an action plan that helps with some of those areas. And we can't completely fix them, and it's not going to be the thing that everybody loves about working here, but at least we can bring them up to a level where people feel a little more satisfied with their work. So we do that through an action plan. And usually when organizations go through a survey, we would usually encourage them, you pick 1, 2, 3 things to work on as an organization. And in the time, in the next 6 months to a year that you'll have to kind of work on this, you'll be able to make significant progress in 1, 2, or 3 areas. If you try to do a little more than that, then it becomes a little more difficult. But the way that organizations will solve for engagement initially is to run the survey, do an action plan, and then we'll see you next year. We'll do another survey and an action plan, and we'll continue to build that way. We call that the measure react approach. We're essentially surveying to understand how everybody feels in the organization about the many aspects of the employee experience that are touching them. We look to understand by analysis what are the key areas of concern here. We act, and then we measure again. So that's the measure react approach. As you kind of get used to the measure reactor approach, you can kind of move into a more proactive approach. And that's going to require some commitment from people in your organization. We go from measure react, and we go to the second level of commitment. We're building buy-in from the leadership team. We know who are the people in the organization that influence the thoughts and actions and feelings of other people in the organization. We teach some of the principles that I'm teaching you today to our managers so that they understand them. And then we ultimately expand ownership. The hard part about engagement for most leadership teams is they feel like, and especially if you have somebody who's the leader of the organization, the president, the CEO, whoever is the head of the organization, they feel the weight of employee engagement on their shoulders. When in fact, engagement is controlled by much more than the top leadership seat in the organization. It can be impacted positively or negatively by the entire management structure, and the reality is by everybody in the organization. We're all working in the same place, and we all have some level of impact. Now, some people have disproportionate impact, right? Like obviously a CEO or a manager or a top leader in the organization is going to have more impact on engagement, but everybody ultimately has it. So the idea of going from measure react is we have one survey where we react to it and take an organizational action plan and put it into place, and we can improve engagement that way. But the way that we really take things to the next level is through driving engagement through the leadership structure. So now all of your managers have some accountability for the people that they are engaging, or the people that they're leading. They have, said a different way, they have accountability to engage the people that they're leading. So we build that accountability. We communicate expectations to them. Here's what a manager is expected of a manager in order to create engagement on their teams. And we are able to, through the survey, be able to, depending on how large the team is, give them feedback on what's going well and what's not going well at the manager level. So so absolutely something you can do. Now, the first time you run through a survey, it's maybe a little bit unfair to place all of that expectation on your leaders, because they've never had that expectation to begin with. So now we're just getting the results of a survey without ever having provided an expectation for them of what they should be doing. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we lay out good, solid expectations for our leadership team in order for them to understand what are the principles that we need in order to engage our team, so that when they are held accountable to the engagement of their team, it's not a surprise to them. All right, this is a kind of a big chart. I'll let you all kind of download this this presentation later and kind of look through this. But I do want to kind of talk through what we're looking for when we're looking at kind of taking action in order to improve employee experience and engagement. First of all, the outcome that we're all looking for is engagement. So if you look on the far right of this diagram, what we're saying is whenever we have a culture and an employee experience, we have an outcome from that. Obviously, the outcome that we would like to see is people to be more fully engaged. But most organizations have an array of outcomes. Some of your people are fully engaged. Some of them are what we would kind of be called satisfied or key contributors. Maybe not always the most excited people to be there, but they're in there and doing the work. We have people that are more on the fence. We call them opportunity group people, people that haven't really decided how much they're going to engage in this organization. And then people that are fully disengaged, that have completely checked out of the organization. This is a group of people that you're unlikely to change anything and make them wake up one day and say, wow, all of a sudden, this is a great place to work. I love working here. They're probably never going to say that. They've disengaged to a level that, honestly, when they've reached that level, if you're looking to build engagement in your organization, those people usually will hurt your efforts to build engagement. They will, they'll kind of speak sarcastically about the efforts to improve engagement. So we've got this disengaged group. So all three of these are groups that we feel, the top three groups we feel like we can work with and we can build their engagement. The fully disengaged group, it's kind of hard. We're kind of waiting for those people to move on, or we're kind of encouraging those folks to move on, we'll say. But the level of engagement that they have is a function of employee choice. So moving backwards in this diagram, people are choosing whether to engage or disengage. That choice is obviously informed by the experience that they're having in that organization. Again, working backwards, right? So they've made a choice of whether to engage, disengage, or somewhere in between. It's informed very much by the experience that they're having there. So if they're having a very good experience, an experience that fits them really well, they're going to choose to at least be satisfied or even fully engaged. If they feel like the experience they're having is very negative, then they're going to choose to disengage. Most organizations, most people in organizations are going to be in these top two green groups, and about 25% of the people in most organizations will fall below those top two green groups. So about a quarter of your organization will be experiencing some level of disengagement. Some of them can be reclaimed, of course, and some of them are just kind of on the outs with your organization. Okay, so we've got that. That's why we call it a 50-50 proposition. We, as an organization, can create an experience that becomes sort of an invitation. Please come and engage with us. We can't force people to engage. If we can, as soon as we find the pill that forces people to engage, we'll let you know and we'll stop doing surveys. But for now, what we need to do is create an environment where people are more likely to engage. They're more likely to choose engagement. So how do we create in that environment? Moving backwards on this, we look, what are we doing at a senior leadership level? how have we aligned our organization with strong values? What are we doing with the mission and the vision of this organization? How well are we communicating the strategy and goals to the organization? How well are we being seen by the people in the organization? How well do they feel like they know us, or they feel like that you have empathy for them? All those things are important when building engagement, but they're not the only things that can build engagement. We also need some organizational support, and oftentimes this may be seen as something that we do from an HR perspective, human resources perspective, but it can be any level of support that you have in order to help people in the organization. That includes things as simple as, how is your office designed? How are you laid out in terms of the teams in your organization? What are the L&D, learning and development programs, that you have? What are the communication systems that you're using in order to collaborate with each other? What are the incentives people have for success? So all of these things are the things that you can put into place that are cultural items, that parts of the way we do things around here, that can support, lead toward engagement, or lead away from engagement, depending on what you have in place. So those organizational support elements are extremely important as well. A third part that we've already talked about, but I'll talk about it again, is the expansion of ownership of employee engagement. So it's not just the senior leadership, and we're not just depending upon organizational support functions in order for us to increase engagement. We also have this relationship that we have at the team and the manager level. Managers that are equipped to help their people engaged, managers that help support the growth of their team, that help them find meaning in their work, and all these things that I'm about to talk about here in a second are the kinds of managers that can promote employee engagement or create that experience or that invitation that will lead people to choose engagement more so than they would choose disengagement. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, and you are correct, there are people in your organization that will disengage no matter what set of circumstances you put in front of them. And that lets you off the hook to a certain extent. You understand based on that, hey, there are people that will engage here no matter what. Based on that, you can say, or that will disengage no matter what, you can say, well, what can I do? That's true. But I will say on the other end, there are also people in your organization that will engage no matter what set of circumstances that you put in front of them. So if you take no responsibility for the people that are disengaging, please also don't take any credit for the people that are engaging in your organization. What we want to do is create the ideal environment in order for people to feel like they can make that choice to engage. So when we look at engagement and when we measure engagement, we're looking at two basic elements. One is, can we get people at least to a level of satisfaction, to where they feel like they're okay. I'm just gonna say, they're okay to come into work every day and do the work that they need to do. They're not thinking the night before, oh, I don't want to go in tomorrow. They're not waking up and hitting the snooze bar 10 times thinking, how can I even face the office today? We get to them to a level of satisfaction. We often do that through the transactional and contractual part of the employer-employee relationship. Some of that contract that you have with your employees is absolutely explicitly contractual. I've agreed to pay you this amount to do this amount of work in this amount of time. Therefore, that's part of satisfaction. But there are other parts of this that people, you may not have put it in writing, but people expect to be part of their job when they take a job. So things like, do I have the training I need to do the work that you're asking me to do? Things like, do I have the tools and resources I need to do? Do we have enough staff to cover the amount of work we're being asked to do? Is the work that I'm being asked to do a reasonable workload for me? All of those things, when they're in place, lead to a level of satisfaction, but they don't lead to any level of deeper commitment to your organization. So we do want people satisfied. That keeps people from walking out the door. But we also want them to commit to your organization at a deeper level, so that not only are they not walking out the door, they're also giving you more of themselves. And we sometimes will put it into more of their heart, spirits, hands, and minds into the work that they do in your organization. And in order to create that, we need something beyond those satisfaction elements, the giving them the tools and the training and the money that you've agreed to give them and all these things. We need something beyond that in order for them to really reach a higher level of engagement. And that's where we bring in this acronym that we've created that really pulls in the 5 elements that we see most commonly driving engagement in organizations. And they are meaning, autonomy, growth, impact, and connection. So meaning is simply that you have purpose in your work, that you feel like the work that you're doing is important to you personally, that your personal goals align with the goals of the organization. Having purpose, you feel like you're doing some good in the world. So the more we can encourage that people feel meaning from their work, the more that we can remind them why we're here and the people that we're serving, the more they're going to feel that. And that can happen at the manager or the organizational leadership level. But doing more of that is going to help people to really feel like, hey, the work I'm doing is important and it's purposeful. Autonomy, the extent to which you trust your employees to do their work without you kind of checking in with them too much or looking over their shoulder and watching them do their work. The amount that you're allowing them to make decisions within their sphere of control, and then to hold them accountable to those decisions after they've been made, instead of just putting a block up before they are able to make the decision. Growth, do they feel like they're making meaningful progress in their personal and professional lives? Do they feel like they're learning things on a day-to-day basis? Do they feel challenged and stretched in the work that they're doing? Impact, do they feel like they're valued for the contribution that they're making in this organization? Do they see a clear link between the work that they do every day and the success of the organization? Do they feel rewarded and recognized for the work that they're doing? All those things kind of go into that impact area. And the last one is connection. And it might be, even though it's the last letter in the word magic, it might be the most important one. In fact, connection is the #1 driver of engagement we find in our database. Another word that we use to describe connection is belonging. This is simply the sense that I feel like I belong here. I feel like I'm a member of this organization, and feel that sense of membership within your agency to feel like, hey, I feel some ownership over the work that I do. I feel like the organization I work with is an organization I respect and enjoy. I like the people that I see every day, and we not only can work effectively together, but we enjoy working together. All those things can fit into this feeling of belonging that people have in your organization. And again, it might be the most important thing that you can foster within your agency, is this sense of belonging. Those are some of the key principles when you're looking at improving engagement in your organization. You want to see what are the factors that we need to look at in order to improve engagement, but we also want to look at what are the structures that are in place, the managers and team level, the organizational support that we are providing, and then at the leadership level, what are the things that we need to do in order to increase meaning, autonomy, growth, impact, and connection from each of those levels. And obviously some of those things can be impacted more from one level than the other. But to be able to look at it kind of across those two, if you were to put those into a matrix and say, what do I need to do from the top leadership level, from the organizational support level, and from the team level in order to support meaning, right? And kind of go through that as an organization to try to understand how we can improve the experience and engagement here. I mentioned at the very beginning that engagement is an outcome, and it's an outcome of your employee experience. And so when we measure engagement on a survey, we're measuring outcomes, and those outcomes are like, I have the tools and resources I need to do my job well. We're not specific about what tools, we're just saying, do you feel equipped to do your work? Do you enjoy working with the people on your team? That's an outcome of all the different interactions that they have throughout the day, and the way that we are able to get people to collaborate and communicate with each other. All those things go into this outcome of whether or not people enjoy working with the people on their team. Same with the sense of meaning and purpose, building that sense of belonging, all outcomes of everything that we're doing as an organization, outcomes of the employee experience. To participate in the engagement survey process, and I think DecisionWise runs and has done this for a couple of years now, where we're running engagement surveys for a number of different agencies kind of as a group. You can register for that with us between March 1st and March 31st. We're going to kick off the process, meaning have a kickoff call and talk about all the things we need to do in order to prepare for the engagement survey on April 11th. That's the current timeline as it stands right now. So you can register to your agency to be part of this between March 1st and March 31st, and we'll kick off everything beginning on April 11th. Really, the process is simple. You provide a list of your employees to DecisionWise along with email addresses so that we have a list of people that we can send the survey to. You communicate the purpose of the survey to your employees. We'll give you some communication templates in order to do that. But you really want to create a sense of safety. You want to let people know we're doing this as a confidential exercise. You're not going to know who said what in the survey, but you're really doing it to create aggregate data that you can then bring back together and look and see how can we improve the employee experience here in order to have a positive impact on engagement in the organization. So there's some benefits for you, but there's also benefits to the employees and being able to share their voice and their opinions on how things are going here. So that's what you do before the survey. We'll administer the survey over 2 weeks. It takes less than 15 minutes for each employee to complete the survey. And then we'll send out reminders to anybody who hasn't taken the survey yet throughout that 2 weeks in order to make sure that they've had the opportunity to take some time to provide feedback. Really, the purpose in the post-survey process is to make sure that something gets better, right? It's the measure react approach. We're doing a survey, therefore you're going to look at it and see what are the areas that we need to address. We need to improve on those areas. And part of this process will be to be provided a report from us about where are your areas where you've scored well, where have you not scored as well, what are some of the areas that we would recommend you to take some action on, and then we'll also spend time with you in a debrief call in order to walk through your results as well. Post-survey goals: communicate results to the team, take action on the feedback you've received, and then expand ownership if you have that ability to kind of then set some expectation with the other managers that work in your agency or in your organization. Okay, I'm out of time. I want to wrap up with just a summary slide before we turn this back over to Jeremy. But remember that the organizations benefit from engaging their employees, and there's financial benefits, but I think you also see the benefit of having an employee that enjoys the work that they're doing, that enjoys being there in your organization, feels like they fit in, feels like they belong, and feels like the work that they're doing is a good fit for them. There's extreme benefit to that for you as a leader to not have to worry about what's going on in your organization. But engagement is ultimately an outcome of positive employee experience, which is an outcome of culture. Engagement can be improved through greater meaning, autonomy, growth, impact, and connection. We've shown you that model as we've gone through this. And really, to get started on this, all you need to do is kind of start with that measure react approach that we talked about before. We'd love to have you register with us to be part of this. It's interesting from the standpoint of each of your own individual organizations to understand what's going on there, but also as sort of an industry, to be able to have that many people, that many organizations being willing to run a survey at the same time can be very interesting to look at the industry overall and see what's going well, what's not going as well, where organizations really succeeding and where are they struggling, given where we are in the economy, et cetera. So it'll be great to get some of that feedback and some of that information to be able to share back with the ALTA at the end of this as well. That's all I have to present for now. We'll take some questions later, but I'll turn the balance of the time over to Jeremy.
All right, David, thank you. Well timed. And if anyone on the webinar is interested in getting signed up, reach out to me and I can connect you. David, should I connect them with you?
Yeah, or to McKay would be another good one to connect them with, because I think he'll be coordinating all of that.
Okay, great. And just with all the phishing emails our industry gets, you'll want to probably let your staff know that they'll be getting if you're participating, let them know that they get an email about the survey. Otherwise they may just delete it. Now we're going to take a little bit of time to hear how Shauna and Ted used the survey results at their companies. Shauna, let's start with you, and if you don't mind, you can tell a little bit about your agency. Where are you located, your employees, you have multiple offices, just so people can get a little bit of understanding of your situation, and then Ted, a little bit of information about your operation as well.
Sure, thanks. So I am located in South Central Pennsylvania. We're considered a large agent, but we're actually a small large agent. About 20 employees at the time we did DecisionWise, and I wanted to do DecisionWise to really gauge if what I was seeing and feeling within the office was actually what they were seeing and feeling. And to make sure the culture was being followed and to know where we were with that.
So Ted, how about for your company, a little bit larger?
Yeah, Jeremy, we're a regional underwriter. We're based out of Baltimore, Maryland. We have 56 employees, not all of whom are in the Baltimore area. They're spread out through about 15 states. And I decided to participate in the DecisionWise program simply because I was a member of the committee that helped put the program together. And I didn't want to promote a program to our members that I had not personally participated in and could support firsthand.
So why don't we talk a little bit about the process then? So you participated firsthand, how did it go, as far as, developing the survey, the questions, and then implementing and getting participation from your staff?
We had very good participation. The implementation of the program was very simple. It was really led by DecisionWise. As they had stated, all we had to do was provide our employees' names and email addresses, and so we could get reporting on a department basis, which department they were in.
All right, Shauna, how about for you? How did implementation go? You mentioned you wanted to find out, what was actually happening in the office, but getting it set up and implementing, was it smooth for you as well?
Yeah, it was super simple, just like what Ted said. I did have a staff meeting, let them know what we were doing, that all their responses are confidential, so I wanted them to be honest. And, this is to help gauge where we are. We actually did it 2021, David, I think we did, right? So we were still pretty busy with the settlements and refis too. But the questions that they asked the staff didn't take long at all. We had 100% participation. If you look at his, it says one didn't participate. That was me. Because I own the business and I was like, I'm not participating in it. I think everything's great. So I didn't really honestly give them a choice to participate or not. I told them this is what we're doing. And they all really kind of enjoyed answering the questions, and they were honest. They were truly honest with their responses.
So were you looking, and maybe it's both, were you looking to find ways to improve your operation, or were you looking to confirm with some of your employees and your culture that it was working the way it should?
For me, it was both, right? Like you want to gauge that where they are, and we're a pretty close knit group, the 20 of us. So I can tell you their spouses, kids, dogs, like they can tell you things about me. We're close, so I felt like I had a really good handle on it. The one thing that I was surprised about, because I always cross-train and I try and make sure that we always have at least one backup for somebody else in the office, and they wanted more training. I was like, oh, all right. I thought I was doing okay with that, but I wasn't. So they're getting more training, right? And they're probably cringing now, but that was the one big takeaway. Some of the things that I knew, there's just times where there's certain personalities that don't get along. So there were some comments you kind of knew who was stating those comments, and you could kind of take that in context versus pulling that to the entire office. But it did help me plan for the growth and the continued culture and how we're going to maintain things.
And Ted, how about for you? What did you learn from the survey results?
Can't hear you.
I think you're still muted, Ted.
I'm sorry, thank you. When I signed up for the program, I did it because I think, all companies should always strive to improve their workplace culture and their environment in order to retain top talent. But I frankly wasn't certain what to expect from the program. I'm not a cheerleader or a kumbaya type of leader, but I do try to treat our employees with respect and show gratitude for their efforts. So I was wondering if that would be reflected in their opinion of our work environment. And I'm not meaning to brag, but we scored above the industry average in almost every category, which was nice to see. But what I learned from participating in the survey was frankly surprising. We scored well because one division gave us almost 100% ratings across the board, which is great. But those ratings were offset by very low 40 percentile ratings given by the staff in another division. This frankly supported concerns we had with the management of that division, and it gave us insight into where the problems existed. This allowed us to target where changes needed to be made and helped lead to more open and honest discussions with members of that team. So it was very helpful to us.
So there's some data that you can compare your results to industry average, some benchmarking?
Yes, that's correct. And that's one of the benefits of having this dedicated towards the title insurance industry.
Yeah,
And I
that
think
was
it also compares to industries overall, both the title industry and industries overall. So you get a broad scope.
And Shauna, you were going to add something.
I was just saying, it's extremely helpful to gauge, and it's always nice to be able to gauge against your, I don't want to say competitors, but your colleagues, right, within ALTA. And titles usually very centralized to where you are, and you know, there's so many different, like, you know, California, for instance, the buyers and sellers don't meet, and Maryland and Pennsylvania, where it's and I are, if they're not meeting, they're upset. They want to meet the seller. They want to find out about the house and what happened. So there's just so many different ways to do title throughout the country, but it's still title insurance. And our employees still do the same things. And, you know, whether it's 5,000 settlements a month or 5 settlements a month, it's still the same process that we go through. So it's nice to be able to gauge yourself. And as an owner, I used to get caught up in working in my business and not on it. And I changed that years ago. So it's been really good as an owner working on your business to gauge, how am I doing with my colleagues? And am I falling behind, or am I doing okay? Am I leading the pack in certain things? So that was very interesting. Yeah,
ChatGPT isn't doing everything for us yet. You know, we still have humans in our offices. So,
Right.
so Shauna, you mentioned that some of the feedback that you learned was they wanted more training or education. Was there anything else that from the survey that you didn't expect?
They actually like when I was in the office, which I was surprised. As everybody who knows me knows, I travel a lot, and the way that I have the office set up, that if I'm there, it's a bonus. If I'm not, it runs without me. And they actually preferred when I was there, and helped and was, you know, giving them feedback. So I was surprised about that as well.
Okay. All right, just a reminder, if you have any questions, submit them in the questions box. We can ask Shauna and Ted directly, or if you have any questions for David. So Ted, Shauna, you know, her employees like her in the office. Do they like you in the office?
They love me, Jeremy. You know that. No, seriously, you know, I don't know that I learned anything about our company that I didn't expect, but the program, I think the results of the program were surprising to me, as they were more actionable than I had anticipated. Although individual respondents were not identified, getting ratings on a division by division basis provided insight on where we could target our efforts for improvement.
I didn't quite catch the end there, a little bit of feedback, but maybe you can walk through a little bit. Maybe you didn't have to change anything. You said that, you know, your office is perfect, but you know, after reviewing results, were there any modifications, changes that you implemented?
Well, I met with the individual managers of each division to discuss their division's results, and we discussed both areas where they were doing great as well as areas where they were falling behind. We also discussed what changes could be made to address the less highly rated attributes in order to improve overall employee satisfaction. And Jeremy, I intend to participate in the program again next year after allowing time for things to be implemented, so we can see if we're making progress towards improving our overall work environment.
And Shauna, how about for you? Was there anything you'd like to share that you changed or implemented after analyzing the results?
As I stated earlier, more training, right? So I have them a lot I have them on schedules of webinars, CyberCon IQ training for the email hacks and all that fun stuff. With our underwriters, I have them on taking the webinars, like the hour little webinars are nice. And if they want to learn about another aspect of the industry, they can do so. The other thing we did is we had some people that were retiring and were very sick and would not be working. So we had hired 4 new people in November of 2021, I'm not sure which. So in order to get them into the fold more quickly, we formed a committee with the staff members, and once a month I pay for them to go do something fun. It could be happy hour at our office after work. But they come up with their ideas. They did a chili cook-off last spring, so they all made their chili and came in, and they had this little way that they were grading each other. They've made candles together. We watched a Christmas movie, had just some food and snacks and did that. So just to form that bond outside of work to make sure that the culture's alive and they're still running with that. And they really enjoy that.
Nice. All right, David, we have a few questions for you. One is, how often should you survey staff to see if you're making improvements? Is it quarterly, yearly?
It kind of depends on the level of maturity that I do. Remember, I showed that maturity model in the middle of that presentation. I think initially, it depends on how quickly you want to see feedback from what the programs that you're implementing as a result of it. There's a lot of organizations that will do it every year or every other year to start out. When you start wanting to hold managers more accountable to it, you start wanting to do it a little more frequently so those managers can have feedback and make adjustments on a more frequent basis. And oftentimes what you do with that is back it off to a set of fewer questions. So you're only working with maybe 10, 15 questions in a pulse that would be quarterly, but most organizations start out every year or every other year.
And then Rich had some questions about the process. How many questions are typically asked? Do companies have the ability to customize questions? And we kind of answered this. You provide industry benchmarks, yes. But so how many questions are asked, and can companies customize?
I don't have the survey in front of me. I think it's about 50. Takes about 15 minutes for somebody to go through it. It's about 50 questions. And there's no customization with this program because we're asking the same questions across all of ALTA in order to provide the benchmark. So if we were doing different questions for every company, every organization, we wouldn't have benchmarks. So we are doing this consistent set of questions for everybody that participates in the program.
Apologize for a little bit of the feedback we've got in the webinar. A couple other questions and we'll wrap up. And this is in regard to the size of the operation that this service is most effective. So we've got a few of them coming in about whether this is effective for a small size. ALTA membership ranges from 1 or 2 employees to several hundred. So Kim asks, is the program designed for a very small staff? We have 5 employees, one of which is a manager who is the sole escrow officer. And then Jane asks, have you surveyed a title company with 400 plus employees, 50 managers? Would this fit with the April 11th timeline?
Yeah, it would fit. And I'm not sure if we had somebody with 400, but it was close. We've had a couple that were pretty large title organizations, but the smallest I would say is probably about 5, because if you have fewer than 5 that take it, you can't get results from it, because that's the confidentiality threshold. If it's less than 5 people, then we're not going to show the results just to protect the confidentiality of the people who took it. But 5 is kind of the base level. I'm going to say that most organizations would be somewhere between 10 and a couple hundred, the ones that we've been working with in this as part of this program. But DecisionWise has also done surveys with organizations that are 80,000 people. So we do that outside of this industry with other organizations that are quite large.
Okay, all right, thank you. If you missed parts of today's webinar, or if you think others in your office would benefit from listening, as I mentioned earlier, a recording of the presentation will be available on ALTA's website. It's alta.org/webinars. You'll also get an email tomorrow with a link to the recording, as well as a link to the PDF of today's presentation. I do need to thank Old Republic Title once again for sponsoring today's webinar. Ted, Shauna, anything else you'd like to add before we to wrap up? Although I have you both muted, so let me unmute you.
I would just say, if you're thinking about it, and if you're on the fence, just go for it. You know, I know we're in a down market, but this is where you need to spend money on your marketing, and you need to spend money on your employees and their engagement, because the market's coming back. It'll come back this year, and you don't want to be stuck unaware and have employees who are not engaged.
And Jeremy, I would just say it's really a great value. The ALTA committee that put this together negotiated a very favorable rate with DecisionWise. You're not going to get the same bang for your buck with any other outfit.
All right, yeah, and definitely a down market, but now is the time to assess your operation, whether it's from a staff perspective, technology. Yeah, take a little bit of time, invest in your operation, and be ready to rock and roll when the market's back on the upswing. Shauna, Ted, David, thank you again for sharing your expertise on employee engagement and surveys. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.